I'd like to call the meeting to order. Let's review our agenda real quick. Under staff updates, we're going to get a COVID update. We're going to talk about Waste Pro CPI adjustment, get an update on the sports park community planning, discuss the Skyline Transportation Service, and appointments to the Industrial Facilities and Pollution Control Financing Agency. Are there any other items that the commissioners want to discuss during the briefing meeting? I did have one item. I think we're going to talk about this later this evening. We're talking about the homeowner grants later today. Could I have just one question about it that maybe we could talk about during the briefing meeting, kind of in preparation for our evening discussion, if that's okay? So I'm going to add that item. Are there any other items that people have any discussion for? Okay, well, this will be our agenda for the briefing meeting. Are there any questions about any items on the agenda for our meeting this evening at 5? Very good. All right, well, let's start with our COVID update, and Stacy Saunders will help us out with this item.
All right, well, thank you so much for the time today. And I'm just going to go ahead and get started. It sounds like you all are going to be very busy this afternoon. So let's just go ahead and start with our metrics. As of yesterday, we have confirmed 29,011 total cases of COVID-19 in our community. And we have experienced now 431 COVID-related deaths. It's a very sobering number. Rightly so, because it's just not a number. It's each one of those is a person in our community, someone who was loved by others and cherished by them. So I just wanted to take a moment to recognize that. Unfortunately, our current metrics have not improved since the last time I saw you. In fact, our case rate has increased from 113 to 121 per 100,000 in the last week. And overall, as you'll see on the next slide, we are experiencing a very high level plateauing of our cases. That's not exactly the place that we want to be as we enter the major holiday season. And the CDC still considers Buncombe County an area of high transmission. Our current percent positivity has increased since last week as well, from 4.4 to 4.7 this week. While this is still below the desired 5%, an increase is definitely not what I wanted to see as we are a week away from Thanksgiving. It's encouraging, however, that our death rate did decrease again this week, bringing our death rate to 0.8, so about 2 deaths in the last week per 100,000, down from 1.5 the week before. Our hospitalization rates remain encouraging. They are low and stable and have been for a few weeks now. So in the end, the message today is that we've plateaued at a really high level of cases. I am hopeful that the increase that we saw from last week to this week does not continue into the next week. But much of that depends on us. And when I say that, I know that folks are tired. I know they're really fatigued by COVID. I hear almost every day the frustrations from folks that COVID has stretched us. It has most certainly exhausted us. And I think, not that I like to humanize a virus, but that's what, COVID-19 is hoping that we'll give up. And it's hoping that we'll be quitters. And I'm asking everyone listening not to give up, that we have a lot of things going well for us. I'm going to be talking about those in a little bit as I talk about our vaccine efforts. But with the holidays approaching, please help us minimize the impact of COVID-19 this holiday season. Please begin planning your events with safety and health in mind. We'll talk more at the end about how you might plan for the upcoming holidays for yourself and for your family and friends. For now, remember that we do have a face covering requirement for indoor public spaces in our county, a necessary tool right now as we continue to land in this area of high transmission per the CDC. And when added to our other efforts like vaccine uptake and quick identification of cases, we have the potential to stave off large peaks in cases through the holidays and enter the new year in a place of great hope in controlling and managing COVID-19. Before I talk about the case distribution that we usually go over, I wanted to point out that leveling off or that plateauing I mentioned before, the very far right of that curve. You can see that stepwise sort of pattern that I mentioned last time, and now we're seeing just a leveling off of that. The levels that we're seeing now aren't too different than those of the summer 2020 surge and the later stages of the winter 2020-21 surges. And again, that's with the holidays yet to come. But not much has changed in the distribution of cases. The greatest proportion remains in our 25 to 49-year-olds, which has been consistent. Our 0 to 17-year-olds actually remain stable in the proportion of cases. They've been around 21% for the last few weeks, after seeing much higher levels previously. While case rates have worried me, most certainly this week with their slow change, it's been the vaccination arm of our response that I gain hope. That's where I gain hope right now. That you can see here, I want to draw some attention to the red line that you see at the bottom that creeps up toward the end there. That's not a line that you've seen before, because that represents our 5 to 11-year-olds. And I just want to say they've been eligible for less than 2 weeks, and already we're seeing that 15% of our 5 to 11-year-olds in Buncombe County have received their first dose. I just want to commend our vaccine providers in our community for that dedicated effort, but also commend those families and those kids for coming out. That's almost 2,800 kiddos that have become superheroes for their communities, protecting themselves and helping to build a stronger shield around our community. I actually got to meet some of these superheroes at our 40 Cox location. I got to learn about dinosaurs, and I got to learn about their favorite foods, watch them color and be creative, and also got to talk to some parents and caregivers who expressed their gratitude to the community. We also saw many parents and caregivers getting whatever dose they needed as well at all of our sites, most often a second dose or a booster. So it definitely was a family affair. Many thanks to those families who have joined us so far, and we welcome others to join us at upcoming events. I'll talk more about those events in just a second. Overall, about 65% of our total population has received at least one dose, and approximately 74% of the eligible population has received at least one dose at this time. So let's move on and talk a little bit about vaccine operations and our current efforts. The last few meetings, we spent a lot of time covering all of our past events and the planning for 5 to 11-year-olds, so I'm not going to go through all of that again. I'm really going to focus today on our current efforts for 5 to 11-year-olds. And as of last week, Buncombe County HHS has administered 104,928 total doses of COVID-19 vaccine. And we continue to have our fixed site, which is at 40 Cox, and we continue to do community outreach events. So just a reminder that our fixed site is now Tuesday through Friday, 9 to 4, located at the health department at 40 Cox. In that very first week, we administered 320 pediatric doses through the 40 Cox location. We have several community outreaches scheduled. I call these the Saturdays at school. They are also 9 to 4. We just completed our first one, which was November 13th at Asheville Middle. Very well attended. We reached 393 people, with almost 250 of those being pediatric doses, and 147 of those being folks who were 12 and older. Up next, we'll have North Buncombe High School on November 20th. Again, Saturday, 9 to 4. And then a break for the holiday for folks, well-deserved, and then come back on December 4th at Irwin High. And also, because of the FEMA resource out here in Western North Carolina got extended until December 14th, they have also added high schools to their schedule. So we'll have December 4th at Irwin, where Buncombe County HHS will be giving vaccine. But also at the same time and same day, we'll have Robertson High, where MAHEC and FEMA will be giving out vaccine. And then on December 11th, the Buncombe County HHS will be at Owen High, and our partners at MAHEC and FEMA will be at Reynolds High. And then there are also other vaccine opportunities in our community, including the Eddington Center in Asheville through the state vendor partner StarMed. We also have many major pharmacies like Walgreens, CVS, Ingalls, who are also providing pediatric doses and all other doses. And there are also some medical providers who are providing that. So most of the sites that I mentioned today are offering all vaccine types, which is making it a great opportunity for grown-ups to get whatever dose they need that they may be missing, while their 5 to 11-year-old gets their first dose. So again, I just want to say kudos to our team for making this outreach event, all of our outreach events, welcoming for 5 to 11-year-olds. Truly a celebration, as there were balloons and videos and other activities to really make it a pleasant experience for those in the 5 to 11 range. And as a reminder, you can always check Find My Spot locator to find a vaccine provider near you if one of those spots that I mentioned does not work for you. So we've talked a lot about vaccine, but particularly as we enter holidays and may be interacting with more folks, and folks might, who might be having symptoms, may need a reminder that if you are having symptoms, any of the symptoms listed on this slide, please get tested. There are several testing options in our area, and you can find one using the Find My Testings location website. You can visit Harrah's Convention Center, where, again, the state vendor partner StarMed is also providing testing opportunities. Also, while vaccination is our best tool to prevent illness, if you do contract COVID-19, treatment is available, and including the monoclonal antibody treatment. It is available to those who have had symptoms of COVID-19 for 10 days or less, and if taken early, can reduce the risk of severe illness, hospitalization, and death. So you can check out the covid19.ncdhhs.gov/find treatment website to find a provider near you. So as we head into the holidays, particularly as this is the last time before Thanksgiving that I'll be speaking at a briefing, that I wanted to provide folks with some holiday tips and recommendations as you think about your Thanksgiving holiday. And as you ready yourself and your family for Thanksgiving, please think about a few tips and recommendations, including protect those not yet eligible for vaccination by getting vaccinated, plan events outdoors if possible, and avoid crowded indoor spaces. In communities with substantial or high transmission, should you be traveling, in communities with substantial or high transmission, all individuals should wear a mask in public indoor spaces. We already have that as a face covering requirement here, but if you travel elsewhere and they do not have a face covering requirement, please remember that recommendation. If you are sick or have symptoms, please do not host or attend a gathering. I think that's one of the most important ones, because this is a special time for families, and it's really hard sometimes to say, hey, I can't come, but this might be the very best decision you make. If you have symptoms, please do not attend, and please do not host a gathering. Instead, please go get yourself tested. Please don't assume that it's a cold. Right now, as I said for the last several weeks, the predominant thing that is circulating right now is COVID. So go get yourself tested just to confirm, and please stay home. For our folks who are going to be traveling, please review the CDC recommendations for travel. Here are just a few of those, including that the CDC still recommends delaying travel until you are fully vaccinated. If you are considering traveling for a holiday or an event, visit the CDC's travel page to help you decide what is best for you and your family when you are traveling. If you are not fully vaccinated and must travel, follow the CDC's domestic travel or international travel recommendations for unvaccinated people. And everyone, even people who are fully vaccinated, are required to wear a mask on public transportation and to follow the international travel recommendations. So as I close out today, like I said, this is the last time I get to talk before Thanksgiving. I did want to take a moment to wish everybody in our community a very healthy and safe Thanksgiving, and just want to express my gratitude to our public health staff, emergency management, all other county departments and community partners who have given so many hours, so many weekends, and so much of yourselves to respond to COVID-19 and still provide all the very needed services in our community. I am thankful to your families and your loved ones who have and continue to share you and your time with us as we have tested, investigated, traced, housed for isolation and quarantine, and continue our vaccination efforts for our neighbors. I can't express my heartfelt gratitude enough to everyone. So thank you, commissioners, for your time today in this presentation.
Thank you, Stacy. Commissioners, are there any questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is the Waste Pro CPI adjustment and contract update, and Dane Peterson will present this item.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good afternoon.
Good
Hope
afternoon.
everybody's doing well. My name's Dane Peterson, Buncombe County Solid Waste Director, and here today to provide an update on the residential waste collection contract, which we have with Waste Pro. So here with us today as co-presenter is Melinda Barkley with Waste Pro. So thank you for being here today, Melinda, and thank you to Waste Pro for the services they provide in our communities. So some background information on the contract. The franchise waste collection contract between Buncombe County and Waste Pro began in January of 2020. Time flies. Here we are at the end of the second year in the contract. So this is a 5-year base term contract with two-year extension options at the end of the base. And the basic service premises for this contract is weekly trash and every other week recycling collection in the unincorporated areas of Buncombe County. And this is a CPI contract, and Melinda will speak a little more to the inflationary increase that's planned for calendar year 2022. Regarding performance, when we're talking the time frame of May to October of this year, Buncombe County Solid Waste Department, we have logged and tracked 230 complaints. You can see the complaint counts per month in the chart there. And put that in perspective, Waste Pro has provided approximately 1.2 million service collection events in that time frame. The majority of complaints that we've saw have been for missed trash and recycle pickup. And we have enforced liquidated damages in the amount of $30,700 in fines, and that's associated with missed service and noncompliance issues. And at this point, I'm going to turn over to Melinda to talk more specifics on Waste Pro's end.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. Our Regional Vice President, Mr. Chip Jingles, regrets not being able to be with us today, so I will do my best to fill in his absence. Currently, we have subscribers that are 33,660 active accounts currently today. Some of that will fluctuate due to move-in, move-outs, some seasonal changes that take place, as well as some non-payments. Customer service. Some of the things that we are constantly doing is trying to add additional agents to be able to handle the calls that are coming in. Currently today, we're answering approximately 98% of those calls by an actual agent. They are not going to a voicemail. Some of the communication that we do to our subscribers, should we have a delay in a route, a weather change, something of that nature, we utilize a system called Call Them All. And so it actually makes an outbound call, leaves a message, or actually speaks to someone who is there to answer the call. And with that information, we are constantly updating our database to make sure that we have accurate information. Some of the expenses that we've seen as an increase that Dane pointed to, which goes into our request for the increase of the 6.9%, the fuel increase. As we're seeing today, those prices have escalated. We are currently at October of $3.61 a gallon, compared to March of this year at $2.58 for diesel. Some of the additional costs that we've had are the material costs for carts at our supply chain. We are seeing an additional 25% increase related to the cart manufacturing. Some of the things that we're trying to do to help, and I am going to do my best to increase this. Excuse me, thank you. Increase investments in our employees. One of the things that we did to try to keep up with the labor demand that's in the area is that we changed our payroll conversion from a day rate pay to an hourly pay. So with that, we saw approximately a 50% increase in cost for our labor. That was meeting with the demands in the area to try to have those drivers. Some of those challenges, obviously, that we are experiencing, we're trying to consistently and continually recruit new drivers, bringing them on board, such as offering a referral program of $2,000, and then sign-on bonuses of $3,500 to bring on those new employees. Benefits that we are offering to Buncombe County. We are bringing in approximately 10 employees from our greater Charlotte area to make sure that we are providing the service that you guys are expecting, as well as the customers. We have also added 2 new split body trucks to the area to be able to help provide some additional services as needed here. And then wanted to make sure, though, that we do remind you, one of the benefits that we had done is during the COVID time, we were picking up additional material outside the cart. With everyone being at home, working from home, obviously there was the production of more material, so we weren't asking for it to be just in the cart. So we were actually getting out to collect that. With regard to the CPI increases, as Dane mentioned, there was not an increase allowed in the first year of the contract. We are entering into year 2. So that is the 6.9% increase that we have sent the information over for. The CPI increase will be for the remainder of the contract term, and that will be each year. That will be based on the October CPI information. That's with the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and there should have been a document supporting that was attached to the request. The current basic service that we have is $19.21. The current premium service is $25. There's $9.50 that we charge for the bear carts, and so with the CPI, the new rate will go to $20.54. And that concludes my information. Do you have any questions that I can try to answer?
I don't think there's any at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dane. All right, next up is update on the sports park community input process, and Tim Love is going to present this item.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Good
and
afternoon.
Commissioners. Good deal. Just a few slides to get us through today, and I think for this discussion, really want to share with you some of the feedback we've heard from the community, and then provide an open opportunity for the commission to kind of provide some input to us as we move forward. So Today, we'll recap, do an overview of the listening sessions, and then a request from y'all for discussion. So in terms of a recap, the last time this was presented to the board asked staff to, one, go out to the community, gather input, hear from folks. Additionally, begin to research the current practices that are employed at the sports park, as well as with the manager of the sports park. Additionally, look into best practices in the industry for field management, and then ultimately develop an RFP that reflects all of those items. The major item that we've spent time on since then has been through community listening sessions, of which there were 2 sessions that were held virtually. The first was on 10/27, the second on November 2nd. These sessions, I think we would argue, have been well attended, with 60 attendees at the first session and 22 comments received from those participants. Additionally, at the November 2nd session, 40-plus attendees with 16 comments. So we're definitely getting a lot of feedback from folks on their perceptions and feelings about how things are going. What we provided here on this slide is just a few summary themes, just to give you an idea of what we're hearing. But on the subsequent slides, we provided all the comments. The reason we're providing a summary is just to kind of give you a sense of what we're hearing. But you can read through the comments, and this is available on our website for the public if they'd like to read those specific comments as well. So in general, summary themes, additional transparency needed in the usage request process. I think this is kind of a unanimous thought, and something we've heard from supporters of many different programs. It's not sort of divided along those lines. Additionally, there's a perception that some organizations are able to access the fields and others are not. And so I say a perception because there's no data necessarily to support that, but that is the feeling of some of the organizations in our community and something we want to make sure we're clear about. My next bullet I've already kind of alluded to, the lack of documentation to support field usage requests. We don't have 10 years of field usage requests that we can just pull up and sort of audit quickly. And then, in general, a need for additional field space, and as well as the better utilization of existing field space. And so I don't think this is a surprise to us. We know that field space in the county has always been limited, sometimes related to flooding, other times just related to having enough fields, period. Better utilization of the existing field space, I think, is an ongoing question as well. And that's why this board, in partnership with the TDA and others, is pursuing putting turf into place at the Buncombe County Sports Park, because that'll increase the number of playable hours on those fields, as well as the introduction of lighting, which would allow for additional playable hours in the evening. So those are the summary themes we've heard. In the next slide, these are all the comments we got on October 27th. And so I know this is impossible to read and have no intention of reading this to you, but wanted to get it into the slides. That way everyone's feedback was received and sort of documented in the presentation. So you can see here 22 comments echoing many of the themes that I've already sort of shared with you, but please feel free to take a look to see the individual comments and the organizations that are commenting and providing feedback. Similar on November 2nd, again, a lot of comments. I know impossible to read on your screen, but I wanted to get the comments to you, so please take a look. Again, similar themes, with the number one theme, I think, really being about transparency in the process and making sure that all members of the community have access to the public asset. So in terms of the requests and next steps, would love to hear from commission today on any thoughts you have related to the sports park RFP, anything you've been hearing in the community that you'd like to share. And we'll take that input and continue to move forward as we do our assessment of best practices, as well as kind of what we're currently doing, understanding costs, the process, et cetera. And then, when we sort of incorporate those feedback into the RFP, we'll be back before you to get additional feedback before we go live. But just want to leave it open to y'all at this point.
Questions? Comments?
Tim, In light of some of the comments that I've heard from people in the community, have we looked at what it would cost if we bring this in-house? Because, it could be something like this to farm out. It's going to always be controversy, dealing with the kids and whatever. But would we have more control over it if we were doing it in-house? And to make sure that it's, that everything is done the way it should be done. Not saying it's not, but I'm just wondering, would we have more control and would it be better for the county?
Commissioner, your question understood. So part of our process will be to assess what those potential costs would be if this was managed in-house. And so that'll be sort of a check in the process to understand what that cost would be. And so we are looking at that. We're conducting an analysis in-house using our strategy and innovation department. We had presented some initial numbers that were provided by our recreation department, but we wanted to have it a step removed. And so we're using that sort of that source for that analysis. And so we will do that, and that'll be a part of the presentation that we bring before the board. So.
It's not just cost, right? I mean, like, and I'm not an expert on this, so if I say something wrong, it's totally fine to be like, no, that's just not right. But like, if we were managing it ourselves, yeah, there would be all these costs, but right now, ABYSA doesn't pay for the fields, right? As the biggest user, that's their benefit, right? They incur these costs, but then they get to use these fields extensively at no cost, whereas for the model where the municipality or the county manages fields, they incur the cost, but then everyone who plays pays a fee to use the fields, right? So you have a revenue source to cover the costs.
That's correct. There's certainly a revenue for field rental, which is something that would be rolled into any cost. And so I said a cost assessment, but what we mean is kind of a cost benefit, so that we're looking at both sides of the equation. Referring to ABYSA, I think there's also costs that they're sort of generating as well and sort of assuming, with the maintenance. And I say that, I know you know that, but I just want to make sure that's clear. There is an expense there. It's not something that is borne by the county.
As part of the process, and I know, there's only so much time to spend on any kind of study process, but just curious in terms of the process, when you look around around North Carolina, is one of these models a lot more common than the other? Is it that like the largest kind of league of whatever kind is typically also in the management business, whereas like the kind of the internal maintenance management, is one of these a lot more predominant than the other?
And we are looking at multiple models. I know a few that have been shared with us, or in Mecklenburg in particular, as well as Forsyth. And I know that if our manager is willing to chime in here, there's a model in New Hanover, that she may be able to allude to as well. So.
Tim is correct. We're looking at all models across the state.
Okay,
Okay, good.
okay. Yasmin?
This is really helpful, and just kind of flagging something that I think is sort of alluded to in the slides is it feels like this is sort of a good opportunity for us to really get our head around the scope of the needs and understand that Buncombe County Sports Park can address some of those needs, but it certainly seems that as our community has grown, so too have our needs around access to fields and recreational facilities. So I think understanding what's specific to the sports park and the need that facility can address, but also as much as we can understand about the need that exceeds that or could never be fully or appropriately addressed by the sports park would be really helpful, just as we're thinking about this kind of in a more longitudinal way.
That's a great point, Commissioner. And our sports commission, who is a partner with us, they've done an assessment of, basically field usage, and think of field broader than soccer or baseball or anything like that, indoors as well. And, one of the remaining top needs for us continues to be soccer as an example, but there's others as well. And we can bring that existing analysis to bear as well. So.
I'd just like to add, I think it's really great that we're looking at this, and especially the transparency and all that. Reading through the comments, I do just want to acknowledge that it seems like everyone agrees that spoke to this in the comments, that ABYSA has been doing a good job of taking care of the fields and that they're in the best shape they have been. So I do also want to acknowledge that as well, because I think that's important as we're going forward to at least be aware that they've been doing a good job with that, even as we change things.
Yep, thank you, Commissioner. And, part of our process moving forward is working with some of these organizations as well to really understand, what's going well, what's not. And so that includes ABYSA, who currently has the usage agreement, but as well as some of the other organizations maybe that have concerns. And so we're actively moving that just to understand, once we get out of, public comment meetings, what are the things that we can work on together to best utilize and ultimately have the best youth sports we can, so.
And ABYSA has the use agreement with the city fields too, correct?
That's correct. And
They went through a process not too long ago to put in place an updated operating agreement?
that's my understanding. I don't have the details of that agreement, but yes,
Okay,
in short.
great. Any other questions? All right, Tim, thanks for the update. Thanks for your work on this. Appreciate it. All right, next up, we're going to talk about the Skyland Transport Service item. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jamie Judd, EMS Division Manager. Here to give you a quick update on this, the discontinuation of EMS transport services by Skyland Fire Department. We received notification, you probably saw on the news a week or so ago, that Skyland has elected to discontinue their transport ambulance and shift to a paramedic quick response vehicle model with that. And so that means that Welcome EMS will be responsible for taking over that responsibility of transport in the southern end of the county. The district they currently serve is highlighted in green on the map. Here is basically the Skyland Fire District's complete response area, as well as Asheville City Station 4's primary response area. So it covers from Mills Gap Road south on US 25, and then branches over to Avery's Creek and then into the Concord community of the Skyland Fire District. So it's a very large district that we are responsible now to provide coverage for by statute. The county is ultimately responsible for providing those transports in that area, and the call volume in that area is high enough that we need to position a new truck in that area to continue to meet the demand of the community. Their intention is to discontinue services January 1st of 2020. So we are beginning to work a plan to make sure there's a smooth transition of services with no disruption to the citizens. We've been talking with their leadership about this transition, creating a plan, and that's what we want to kind of bring you up to date on what we're looking forward going with this plan over the next month and a half to prepare for this transition. So as part of this, Skyline has agreed to transfer ownership of one of their ambulances to us, along with their stretcher system, the stair chair for patient movement, and a cardiac monitor. We would equip it the rest of the way with our standard equipment to make sure we have equipment that our crews are used to using. They also have agreed to house the new unit that we will staff in their station, giving us bay space for the unit as well as living quarters for our crew. Both at their main station at Miller Road, and also continue to provide a space at their Station 4 on Valley Springs Road, which is the entrance to the Rambles, where we currently have an EMS unit stationed as part of our South Asheville response district with that. So in order to keep that seamless transition, we will staff that truck 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Our transitional plan is to reallocate our staffing and make sure at least one paramedic is assigned full-time to that truck for all 3 shifts. Then we'll begin hiring our 24-hour staff of priority to bring our staffing back up to meet the current demands for that. We will be using some of the positions that were approved 2 weeks ago as part of the peak unit transition that we had proposed. But we will be requesting additional positions to cover this truck as part of the FY23 budget. But this is a high demand area. They run over 2,000, anywhere from 2,000 to 2,400 calls per year, which is the call volume of one of our full-time trucks. And so we need to have a full-time 24-hour truck in this area as quickly as possible to maintain service. And so as we begin this transition over the next month and a half, we will be getting things in place. We're already starting to look at our response plans, which is the map that you saw on there, where we identify response priorities into the areas to make sure that we have adequate unit coverage, that we're responding timely with the correct units, using both Buncombe County EMS units, as well as our partner fire department ambulances that continue to operate around that district and also help cover us in other areas of the county. Along with that, we'll be purchasing equipment. They'll provide us bed frames. We'll need to buy, living quarters materials, so mattresses, box springs, cabinets and stuff to put our supplies and things to. We'll be doing that over the next month and a half. Everything pre-positioned for January 1st. And so that basically, that Saturday morning, our crews will walk in with an ambulance and take over responsibility for that district. We're going to continue to hire aggressively as we can through this time to get our staffing to meet this demand. And the goal still is those peak time trucks that we presented last meeting, to get those on the road as quickly as possible while also meeting this demand going forward. And so just wanted to bring you up to date on that, so that you're in loop and make sure you understand what's happening, and see if you had any questions for us as we start to make this transition happen.
All right, thank you for the update. Commissioners, are there any questions? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and the last item listed on the agenda before we get to the homeowner grant question I had is the appointments to the Industrial Facilities and Pollution Control Financing Agency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I come before you today in my capacity as a Commissioner, Secretary, and Attorney for the Industrial Facilities Pollution Control Financing Authority. And Max, if you could bring up what we got. So this board has been in place for a good long while, as you can see, since 1976. It's a creature of statute, Chapter 159. It is an instrument for conduit financing and issues bonds with the permission of this board for various projects in the county. The thing about this authority is that it rarely meets. Back in the 70s and 80s, there's minute meetings where they met regularly and often and issued bonds. It's fallen out of favor, but remains in the back pocket of bond counsel around the state. So it last met in 2018. It's authorized to have 7 members. We currently just have 3. So if you can go to the next one, thank you. So the reason that we need this meeting is that, as indicated in number 2, the LIBOR index, which is the benchmark for what banks charge each other for interest rates for short-term loans, is going away at the end of this year. We just learned that yesterday. So the impetus here is that we don't really have time for the board to go through its normal process of applications and interviewing for positions on this authority. So what we'd like to do is ask that this board, if you could go to the next one, Max, that this board go ahead and reappoint 3 of us as members. And I've drafted Don Warren, Finance Director, and John Hudson from Budget to fill in the seats to make us have a quorum. And then to moving forward, just have the clerk's office go ahead and routinely solicit and take applications for appointment for this board. You'd think that this authority didn't really even need to exist because it meets so seldom, but as indicated on the previous slide, the Ingalls bonds for the $99 million when they expanded the warehouse go till the year 2036. So there's going to be need for some other index might go away, some other refinancing might appear, and while they're redoing the documents for the LIBOR index replacement, they're also going to go ahead and basically refinance and extend the term for a couple years. So it's a thing that's going to be hit and miss for a long time, but it's just never going to be a board that regularly meets. So that's what we're asking for tonight, is for those reappointments and appointments to accommodate Wells Fargo and Ingalls Markets on that request.
So Commissioners, we're asking that you add this to the agenda tonight by consent.
I think it's already on. Is it? Yes. But it's under board appointments. be happy to answer any other questions you have.
Thanks, Michael. All right, that concludes all those items. So I just had one question about the homeowner grant, question I thought I would ask now. And we can talk about it more at the meeting this evening if we need to. But my question is, and I know tonight we'll talk about how much it's been deployed and the budget for it, things like that. When we created this new program through the budget process this year, new program, so we kind of, it's a new policy, had to think through all the details for how it worked. I envisioned that for the folks who meet the criteria, which we had to, we created these criteria, that they would, and it's based on 80% AMI, I believe, that if they meet those criteria and the residency requirement for home ownership, that they would qualify for the grant. So as I understand it, as we're administering the program, if someone does meet the criteria, we then also subsequently ask them to kind of show some kind of expenses, right? And then we, in essence, I guess this is my question, we reimburse them for that expense, or we provide them some funding to cover that expense. And as I was envisioning it when we were doing this new policy, it would be, there would not be that additional step. Basically, if the homeowners show, I own this property, I meet the income criteria, that in essence, they qualify for it, and they would get this grant from the county to help with the, basic affordability of living in our great community. So, but I'm not sure we got into that level of detail. It may have been just sort of an assumption I had, but I wanted to just raise the question because I've heard some comments from some other commissioners that they also weren't envisioning that additional step. So I just thought it'd be an opportunity for us to kind of talk that through since we're going to be discussing it this evening. So do any other commissioners just have any kind of observations on that? Because I don't want to speak for others if I'm kind of alone in this or more, or if there's not, it's not a question that's shared by others. But is the question I have clear, or do were other folks wondering about this too as it got deployed?
It's been a while since we discussed that, but I was thinking that they had to pay, they were never given the money directly to people, that they were having to pay some sort of bill. So right, that it had to be applied around something with housing. So my understanding was for them to be able to do that, they would have to have some type of documentation, I would think. That was my recall.
Is that correct, that the county doesn't pay the individual, we pay some bill that they have?
Correct. We pay mortgage or rent or something or other utilities, but we do not cut the check directly to the homeowner.
And why do we, and I understand maybe part of why we do it that way is that's how we do some other provisions of support to residents for, through other programs. So is it because that is the way that some of our other programs are administered, or is there a legal reason why it must be that way as opposed to, hey, look, if you only make 80% or less of area median income in our community, I guarantee you, there's no, it's not like a question of, do you have expenses that it costs you to live here? Of course you do. So I guess my concern is we're adding this additional step and perhaps, making it a bit more bureaucratic than it needs to be when nobody in that income group in our community doesn't have these expenses. So, but is there a legal reason why it must be done that way, Michael, or can we look at other ideas?
There is, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure about the nuts and bolts of what Philip and his program do day in, day out, but the program has to be treated like any other social services safety net program. So to keep it in line with that spirit and intent, that's the way it was developed. Otherwise, there's constitutional problems with potentially someone saying that we're giving gifts or giving money away, and that's against the Constitution, and there's just no way to do that. But if it is a social services program, limited in scope and limited in its effectiveness. So it's meant to fill in the gaps where all the other social services programs that are over there might miss.
And it's really not a net step, but we can have Philip walk you through that when they come in and do that. It's an upfront conversation. So once you qualify for it, you're showing that you have a home. There's a homeowner's grant, so you already have that. And so it's not a second step that they have to come back and see us. So we've reduced a lot of the steps to make this as easy and seamless as possible. But make sure Philip is ready to talk through some of the steps that we do have in place to make sure that we are following the law. When we structured this program, it was a social services program because we were clear that we could not do it for tax purposes. So once we took that off the table, we went back and said it had to be a social services program. It was not just give cash away to the homeowners. That was the piece that we could not get around constitutionally.
Okay, other questions? I've got a few, but do other people have questions?
Can the grants just be directly applied to the amount that's owed in taxes?
That could be a vendor that they choose to pay, yes, ma'am. But they
So,
have,
so the simplest option, or a simple option would be saying, you owe X in taxes, you've qualified for a grant of Y, and that will be applied against what you owe.
other than, I'll let Fru answer that.
At the end of the day for that program, again, was to fill in some blanks, and it's X dollars, and you can choose from bills X, Y, and Z.
Okay. And so the homeowner then selects,
Yes.
here's the bill.
Utility, mortgage, or taxes, or homeowners insurance, any of those other pieces that has to do with home ownership. Yes, so it could be taxes, insurance, yes.
I mean, in that regard, it actually gives agency to the recipient versus, and what it, to make a selection of saying this is the one that's the hardest right now or the top priority, and automates the payment on that essentially. So it's sort of like saying you qualify for X amount, where do you want it to go? Okay, we'll make that pay. I mean, but your concern is it's that extra step is reducing the number of people participating?
I don't know if it's reducing, I don't, that's one potential question. Would it discourage some people from doing it because it sounds like a big headache? You know, I got to go find some bill or something to do this. Is it more complicated that way? Does it create more burden on us to administer it? Those were the main questions I had. I mean, and partly just to me it also, and I understand, like, look, you know, we need to follow laws and stuff like that, but just in a way, what's the point? Because anybody in this category, I mean, kind of in a way, kind of asking people to prove you have expenses is just sort of seems like sort of silly on a certain level. Now, if someone does choose the tax option, like I'll have it handle the taxes, then so how does that then work? I'll apply it against that, because then it's the county issuing this, right, but the tax is from the county. So exactly how does that happen then?
I honestly don't know, but
Okay.
I was just going to make one comment. I know that Philip and his group work real hard. If you come in to apply for social service program or some benefit or some grant of some form, if you don't fit that one, then the staff works hard to find one that you would be eligible for. So, I mean, they work to fill that and steer them in the right direction to get the maximum benefit that they're eligible for. But if it's $700 and they're eligible for $300, then the $400 is still due, and that's still due in the normal course. And the tax office works with those individuals or anybody that wants to set up a payment plan or anything else.
So if we could ask Philip to just be prepared, you kind of hear the question, so Philip could be prepared to speak to that. And I am glad to hear that they can just apply it to the taxes, because maybe that creates a really simple way. In a way, it is functioning really close to maybe more of how I was envisioning it at the beginning, and people do have that simple, because most everyone's taxes will exceed that amount, right? I would assume the vast majority. So therefore, it would, and since it's the same agency, Buncombe County, in a way, maybe there's a real simple process there that,
I don't believe everyone would exceed that amount. I'm not sure of that statement, but what we do know, if they're qualified for 300 and
for a
pay
home, I bet it
taxes,
would.
and there's leftover, that could apply to their utilities, or it could apply to something else. but
Probably
I'm
not many
sure.
houses in Buncombe County that have a bill less than $500. I'm sure there's something out there, yeah, but
Mobile
the
homes.
vast majority probably will. Maybe some mobile homes would. Well, but they're not going to qualify though, because if they already apply for homestead exemption.
They have the
They
homestead.
don't get this too. All right. Well, any other questions? I just wanted to kind of surface that as we prepare to talk about it this evening too. Any other questions about it? All right. Well, thank you all for letting us spend a moment asking those questions. We've gone through everything on the agenda, so I think we are adjourned until our regular meeting at 5 o'clock. Do we have a need for a closed session this evening, Michael? Okay, great, thanks. Parker's out of town, I believe. I think he's out of town for work. He had to